Hey guys, back again with another video. Now, most of you are probably expecting this to be or was expecting my next video to be a Game of the Year video. Everyone seems to be pumping those out now. The best games of 2013. I'm actually going to hold off till January for that video. The reason why is there's a few more games I'd like to play that could potentially make that list, and I might be able to get to play them at the end of December, early January, and some people too do tend to do their lists then. I know it'll be 2014 at that point, but I don't know. I think I want to wait and hold off because there are a couple games that I'd like to play and get finished before I start making up that list. But this video is going to be a Tales series review. Now this is kind of like what I did with the Zelda series. I'm going to follow that same format. So it's going to be a 3-part video. The first 2 parts, it might be more or less, who knows. But for now I'll say it's 2 parts and 3 parts. The first 2 parts will be covering each game in the series from order of release and my thoughts on them. Now this isn't going to be like an in-depth review of each game. I'm not going to go over the history of each game, like the development history and the history of the Tales series as a whole. This is just kind of my personal thoughts on each game in the series. So, and the third part is going to be a ranking, like what I did with Zelda, from my least favorite Tales game to my favorite. Before we get started, I'll just say the Tales series is by far my favorite RPG series. I've been in love with the series ever since a certain game, and I'll get to that one, which one I started with, as we kind of make our way through the games. The reason why I did this video, there's a couple reasons why I'm doing this video now. The first reason is I just completed the last Tales game I needed to play to do this review series. And now this is North American released Tales games. I know a lot of games haven't been released in North America, a lot of older Tales games. And I'm going to cover those games briefly. I'm just going to mention them and maybe say a few things about them. But I'm going to go more in depth of the games I've actually played, which are all the North American released ones. I just beat the last Tales game I needed to play, actually just a couple days ago. So that's why I'm doing this video now. Also, Tales of Zestiria was just announced. And it looks amazing. It's a worldwide. We're getting a worldwide localization announcement too. It's probably going to be releasing a few months maybe after the Japanese release. Could be longer than that. But I do like seeing that Namco Bandai is really supporting the Tales series in the West now. They really weren't great at that back when, say, Vesperia came out. So it's really nice to see, and that announcement really made me happy. I mean, come on, we're getting Xillia 2, Symphonia Chronicles this year, and then in 2015, most likely, we're getting, Zestiria. So yeah, I've gone on enough here for this intro, so why don't we get started with the first game in the series, and that is Tales of Fantasia. Now, even though Tales of Fantasia is the first Tales game, it's not the first one I played, and actually I think a lot of people are the same way, and there's a big reason for this. Until it basically wasn't released in the West until they brought a Game Boy Advance port out, and I think it was like 2003 this came out. Now this port was apparently not so great. I didn't play this particular version of the game. But I hear a lot that it's not great, and this game has been actually ported multiple times. I've played it on the PS1. It's kind of like a remake, but kind of not. It was originally a Super Famicom game. In 1995, I believe it came out. Developed by Wolf Team, so not the Tales studio as we know now. And apparently the development of this game was really troubled, so a lot of people in the team kind of split off and formed their own company, Tri-Ace, which I know a lot of you will know, most famous for the Star Ocean games. And I think the Tales of Fantasia has a different feel than a lot of other Tales games. I think the only game it felt like to me was Tales of Destiny, the next game. Now, Fantasia, I played the PS1 kind of remake. I played a translated version. There's a great translation out there, and you can get the ROM for it and whatnot. I did my first experience with this game though was back in the emulator days, back when emulators first came out and people were going crazy about them, and it was a relatively new thing. the translation patch was being worked on for the Super Famicom version of Tales of Fantasia, and when that released, I jumped on that immediately. But this was back when I wasn't too heavy into JRPGs, and I had played one other Tales game, I think, and going back to Tales of Fantasia at this time was really, it was hard for me. So I put it down fairly quick after a really annoying dungeon. It's very early in the game, but it's actually one of the worst parts of the game, I think. That dungeon with like miasma, and you're kind of pushing rocks into holes to stop the poison kind of mist, right? That's constantly hurting you as you're traveling. And not only that, you have random encounters every 5 steps during this dungeon. It's really terribly designed. But I put it down at that point. And then, honestly, I think it was only a few years ago that I actually played the PS1. Or actually, it wasn't a few years ago. It actually wasn't too long ago, actually. I think it was not even a year ago. I think I might have been actually still on YouTube when I played it. I just didn't do a review of it. Now, Tales of Fantasia, what do I think of it? It's okay. I know a lot of people are really fond of this game. I have some issues with it. First off, for a Super Nintendo game, this game looks amazing. I love the sprite work in this game. The environments are nice and detailed, a good variety of environments. It has a world map that's where there's like tons to explore. The game is not linear whatsoever. Well, maybe like the story itself is linear, but there's tons of ways to go, tons of different side quests, especially towards the end of the game. The sense of freedom in this game I really did enjoy. The characters and storyline I thought in Fantasia were fantastic. Actually, for the first entry, it's well done. The dialogue I thought was kind of weird. I don't know, maybe some of that has to do with the translation on that particular PS1 version, which is the one I ended up beating. But yeah, so there's a lot to like about Fantasia, but a lot of it I don't like. Okay, first off, the random encounters, which a staple in old school RPGs, and honestly, it wasn't until like the PS2 days that really random encounters were starting to really disappear. Now, this game came out in 1995. Games like Earthbound and Chrono Trigger were already disposing of random encounters, so it was, honestly, it's kind of disappointing to play this and realize that the random encounters are in this game, and not only that, the encounter rate is insanely high. Like, I'm talking like every 5 seconds you're in a battle in this game. Now, ordinarily that would be fine, but that leads into my next complaint with Fantasia, which I think a lot of people are going to probably disagree with, and that's the battle system. And there's a few reasons why I'm not too fond of the original incarnation of the Tales battle system. Forgive me, I can't remember the name, like linear motion something or other. I know lots of people memorize the name of these Tales battle systems because they've got like a name for each one, but I can't quite remember the name. But it plays out similarly to a lot of Tales games where you're on a 2D plane, there's no 3D movement, and you basically run back and forth. But when you attack in this game, you'll run up to the enemy, attack them, and maybe do a combo, and then you'll run back. It's really awkward at first. You do tend to get used to it, and you can get in there for a lot of close attacks if you're playing on manual mode. This is for semi-auto mode. But manual mode you don't get until like halfway through the game, I think. So that was really aggravating to have to deal with that, and you're starting to get used to it. So by the time they give you manual mode, it's too late. At that point, you're too used to the semi-auto mode. But my main issue with the combat, other than the fact that it's clunky by today's standards, I'd say, the animations are nice. I like the battle voices and just the look of battles themselves. But playing the battles was awkward for me my entire way through the game. Like, it was to the point where I was getting so frustrated with the game that I just wanted it to end. And this was like by the halfway mark. But the main thing with the battle system that I don't like, other than the general clunkiness, are the battle animations, like the magic animations. Every time one of your magic users uses a magic power, the game pauses. The battle system just completely pauses and then shows off this drawn-out animation. And this happens constantly, and it completely interrupts the flow of battle for me. I know a lot of people aren't really bothered too much by it, but I found it just completely like frustrating, and the battle system, because of this, the battle system I just didn't really enjoy. Even though for the time, Fantasia was ahead of its time, I gotta say, this battle system, like, you saw nothing like this back then. So it's certainly innovative, and it's good. It's interesting to play this game to see how far the Tales series has come since then. But honestly, Tales of Fantasia is kind of hard for me to recommend unless you're a diehard Tales fan and you haven't played it yet. I'd say a lot of the other Tales games are worth playing over it, and that's just my opinion. A lot of people do love Fantasia, and I can see why, but personally, I don't know, the battle system just really drove me up the wall, as well as those random encounters. Now, the interesting thing with Fantasia is the fact that it did get a remake that actually features those paused animations, where the animations pause the battle. They removed those. It's called Narariki Dungeon Tales of Fantasia X. It's for the PSP. Didn't get a North American release. Probably never will, unfortunately. I'd like to play that version, but we didn't get it. And with that, I'll mention that this Tales series has a lot of spin-off titles. I'm not going to mention any of the Japanese ones that never hit North American shores. There is one, though, that actually did get a North American release. I will be talking about that later. But yeah, that's Fantasia. Overall, a decent game. I just have a lot of problems with it, and it's not a game I'd come back to by any means. The next game in the series was Tales of Destiny, released on the PS1, another Wolf Team game, actually. Now, this one I was very late to. The PS1 version of this game goes for a pretty high price. I think it's like around $70 maybe. I don't know at this exact time, but it's expensive. So I was holding off. When I finally did play it, a ROM of it, actually not too long ago. I was going to do a review on it, but then I considered a Tales series review, and I held off doing like a thoughts video on that game. It was like maybe a month or so ago that I finally completed this game for the first time. Tales of Destiny is interesting in the sense that it's not really much of an improvement over Fantasia. In fact, if you played this game, you'd think it was a Super Nintendo game if it wasn't on the PlayStation. Like, the visuals are basically the exact same as Fantasia. In fact, honestly, they seemed almost a little, like, even worse to me, which is weird. The battle system is the exact same. They've still got the spells, interrupting everything. So you can probably tell that I didn't really quite care for this game as much either. In fact, I like it even less than Fantasia, mainly because I didn't feel the story or characters were as strong this time around. The cast of characters felt kind of bland to me in Tales of Destiny, and the whole time playing it, I just couldn't help but think how this wasn't much of an improvement at all. They really didn't improve much upon in this game. It's still not very linear, which I like, and the world map is fun to explore, but the world map's not even that great compared to Fantasia. Now, I did play the even the Super Nintendo one I felt was better than Tales of Destiny. I gotta say, Tales of Destiny kind of disappointed me. And likewise with Fantasia, it's hard to recommend unless you're a diehard Tales fan that has never played it and would like to see how the series has kind of progressed. But I don't know, to me it just kind of lacked kind of like a soul or charm to me. I was always either bored with this game or very frustrated by the, again, insane amount of random encounters and the battle system just really bugging me. So there's not much really I can say about this game, except there is a remake of this for the PS2, Tales of Destiny remake, and it looks amazing. It looks to fix like every complaint I have with this game. It looks great. Like, I love the art style of this remake from what I've seen. Unfortunately, I don't know if we'll ever get to play it. I think a translation is being worked on for this game, for the PS2 remake. I'd love to play that, and honestly, I might think much more favorably on this game if I had played that remake, but I don't know, the PS1 of Destiny, it underwhelmed me quite a bit. Now, Tales of Destiny on PS1 did get a North American release, and next we would see Tales of Destiny 2. But this isn't Destiny 2, it's Tales of Eternia. Now this is where things got weird in North America for the Tales games, because there is a Tales of Destiny 2, It never made it to North America, and it's a direct sequel to Tales of Destiny. Well, Destiny 2 on the PS1 is actually Tales of Eternia, a brand new Tales game. They called it Destiny 2 because Eternia, I guess, is trademarked with He-Man or something in North America, so they had to call it something else. Why they didn't call it something else and not Destiny 2, because this will confuse a lot of people. It confused me for the longest time. Now, Destiny 2, I'll briefly talk about that. Looks awesome. Again, one of those, it looks like has a great art style. This game's for the PS2, by the way. A translation's being worked on. Hopefully it sees the light of day, because I'd really love to play Destiny 2. Now, the game at hand, though, Tales of Eternia. Now, this was the game that I was talking about in the intro, where I just completed this a couple days ago. Now, this game I love, and you might have been thinking with the first two games, well, he calls himself a Tales fan, but he hates the first two entries. Well, I don't hate those games. I don't know, they were disappointing to me. Granted, I did play those games after I'd played later games in this series, so the disappointment was maybe understandable. Now, Tales of Eternia, on the other hand, this game's fantastic. Now, I talked about how Destiny wasn't much of an improvement over Fantasia. This game is a massive improvement over Destiny. I was shocked because I played this after Destiny. Destiny was the previous Tales game I played. Now, for one, the battle system is much better this time around. It's fluid as hell. It feels great. It's still on a 2D plane. There's no 3D movement. And it can be hard to avoid hits. Sometimes, unless you go to manual mode where you can actually jump over enemies and stuff like that. Defending is still in this game, of course, blocking. But you get manual mode right off the bat. Spells don't interrupt battles, only the summon spells do, and those don't pop up too often, and they're super powerful and awesome to look at, so I didn't mind. The combat just flowed really nicely. It felt good. A lot of different variety to it with the Craymail system, where you could kind of combine like summon spirits together. Certain characters kind of have different summon spirits, and they would, depending on the combinations, you'd get different spells. That was a really fun system to mess around with. Visually, this was a huge step up. I love the art style of Eternia. It looks fantastic. And the game's got a really awesome old school RPG feel as well. So the environments I loved. It's a really good looking game. This was a late PS1 release, so obviously it does look good. But it still astounds me how much better looking this game is compared to Destiny. The soundtrack's nice. As with most Tales soundtracks, though, it's not too memorable. But I do like it. The world map is really fun to explore this time around. In fact, I'd say there's even more to do in this game, especially towards the end. I was surprised at how many side quests there were towards the end. Like, I actually completed quite a fair amount of this game, quite a bit of it. But the game really opens up towards the end. You can really explore this world map, and it's really fun to explore it because there's two different worlds in this game too. There's I don't want to make this sound like an actual review because this game is so fresh in my mind, but I'll just hit point by point. The story is interesting at first. I found it got less interesting as it went on because, like I mentioned before, there are these two worlds, Inferia and Celestia, which kind of one's on top of the other. You start off on Inferia, and they're these kind of two worlds that had like this long conflict. And for like the past 2,000 years, they've been out of contact. And you eventually do like visit Celestia, and it's a cool concept. Unfortunately, the execution's not quite there, and the story is kind of derivative. It ends up being very derivative. The characters, I thought, were kind of bland, and there's only actually 4 main characters in this game compared to the other Tales games, the previous ones. And I don't know, I just found the characters like okay, but they didn't really grab me. It was mainly the gameplay of this game that I really loved. So I've been very positive on this game. There were still elements about it I didn't like, especially compared to later Tales games. First off, random encounters, they're still here. Now the encounter rate is far lower than in Destiny and Fantasia, but it's still annoying because the dungeons in this game, they're pretty involved. There's a decent amount of puzzles, nothing too crazy, nothing too annoying, thank God. Annoying puzzles, nothing drives me crazier than annoying puzzles. Actually, there's a forest early in the game that really pissed me off because these random encounters kind of destroy the sense of exploration. Like, you're trying to figure out where you're supposed to be doing, where you're supposed to be going, what you're supposed to be doing, how you're supposed to, solve these puzzles, and you're running into a battle every 10 seconds. It can get kind of aggravating, and it's why I had to play the game in short sessions. Because it eventually did start to wear on me, the random encounters in this game. The other complaint I have with it is the world map itself. Like, you've got a map on the lower right screen, and towns and things like that are kind of dotted on the map, which I love. You can also press select, and you'll get like a skit kind of that tells you where you're supposed to be going next. I love that. Like, that's an amazing. Which actually I forgot to mention about the PS1 Tales of Fantasia remake. There's actually skits in that game, which were something that was more like, there were more skits in later Tales games, and they're actually one of my favorite parts of the Tales series in general. They're actually in the PS1 remake, all Japanese voices, but still I thought that was pretty cool that those were in that PS1 remake. But the world map in Eternia is very small, so it can be actually hard to tell where you are in relation to other places on the map. I wish you could like bring up like a bigger version of it on the screen, like a lot of the newer Tales games have. But instead you have to like kind of go into your menu and go to the items and choose a map there and then look at it that way. But it can be hard to kind of gauge where things are, and that kind of frustrated me at times, as well as the difficulty spikes. Tales of Eternia, I wasn't expecting the difficulty to be anything crazy, but a lot of the bosses in this game like are fine, and then you'll just hit a random boss that will just fucking destroy you. There was one instance halfway through the game where it was really starting to piss me off. Like, I couldn't beat this boss. I tried so hard, and I eventually did beat him, but I used like fucking like 13 life bottles, like a bunch of MP or TP, and HP healing items. Like, it was ridiculous. And then the next boss was easy as shit. So I don't know, there's those difficulty spikes like a lot of Tales games have, and that kind of pissed me off. Like, it's minor complaints here and there, and if you're going to play this game after playing a bunch of newer Tales games, it might feel dated still. But after playing Destiny of Fantasia, it was a welcome change for me, and I really enjoyed my time with it. It was like a 30-hour game too. It didn't overstay its welcome. Really, really did enjoy Eternia. It's a great game. I definitely highly recommend it. Now, quickly, I'll just mention Tales of Eternia. If you want to play this game, you can either get the PS1 version of it, which is insanely expensive. We're talking like $100 to $120 for a complete copy, or go the route, and this is what I would suggest, PSP. It was actually released in Europe, an English version in Europe. It didn't get a North American release, but PSP is region free, so I'd recommend importing that. I think it's like maybe around $30 or so. It's not too expensive, and definitely is probably the best way to play this game. Now, Destiny 2 was the next game on PS2. Of course, we didn't get that, but we did get the one after. Now, this is the big one. Tales of Symphonia. Now, probably the game most people start the Tales series with. The game that got a lot of people into the series, myself included. Now, I think basically, Symphonia is basically the Final Fantasy VII of the Final Fantasy series. It's by far the most popular. I think it's the highest selling in North America, at least. And it's still popular to this day, and it still holds up to this day. And of course, we're getting the PS3, not really a remake, but kind of. But we're getting, Symphonia Chronicles, so people that didn't play that game can enjoy it when it comes out on PS3. Now, the hype for this game was interesting. Now, I didn't own the PS2 at the time, so I missed out on all those classic JRPGs. But at the time this was about to release, people were starved for an RPG on the GameCube, which, at the end of its lifespan, it didn't really get many RPGs, and this is, in my opinion, definitely the best one that it got. I remember, like, back on GameFAQs back in the day, on the message boards, like, the hype for this game was insane. Like, and I got sucked into that hype not knowing anything about this series. This was the first Tales game I played, after all. And I went into it not knowing anything about the gameplay, other than the fact that it was multiplayer. That was a big draw for me, the fact that you could play this game multiplayer. A JRPG that was multiplayer. That was like, this crazy thing to me, which I should mention all previous games were all multiplayer as well. You can play them two-player. I think Destiny, Actually, you know what? I'm not going to say that. I don't know which ones of the previous ones were multiplayer because I didn't play multiplayer on any of those games. Symphonia, in fact, is the only Tales game I've ever played multiplayer. There's a reason for that. Now I'm going off on a tangent kind of here, but before I talk more about like how the game released and how I got my hands on it and my initial reaction to the game. But I played it with my brother maybe like halfway, where he controlled Genus and I controlled Lloyd through about half the game. He started eventually getting bored of it, and then I kind of finished the rest of the game. And the thing with the multiplayer, and I think why he got bored of it, was like you control Lloyd as the first player, and you do all the world map and the exploring and the dungeon traversal. Well, the only time the second player gets to do anything is when you're in combat. So that, I think, turns a lot of people off, including myself. Honestly, I don't think I'd want to take the reins as a second player. I'd want to be the one in control, kind of exploring the game. So I know a lot of people really love the multiplayer in Tales games. It's never appealed to me for some reason, even though it's nice that that option's there. But that was one of the main reasons I was excited, believe it or not, for this game. But I don't know. Going in, I knew nothing about this game. Of course, day one, I went in and bought it. And it just really surprised me how much I liked this game, because at the time, I wasn't crazy about turn-based RPGs. All the previous ones I had played. In fact, one of my favorite RPGs at that time was still Super Mario RPG on the Super Nintendo, which had like a timed act-based action or battle system where you kind of had to time your button presses to do jumps on enemies and stuff like that. And so Tales, to me, when I first played Tales, I was amazed at the battle system. It completely blew me away, to be honest, that here's this JRPG that I feel like I'm playing a fighting game where like the combat is really fluid and fast and, most importantly, fun. And the Symphonia's combat system has been improved on. And actually, my memory's a bit hazy here. I haven't played this game since it came out, actually. That's why I'm excited for this PS3 version. But Symphonia, I love to death. The story and characters I really enjoy in Symphonia. The cast of characters is actually still one of my favorite casts of characters in a Tales game. The voice acting is fantastic here. Which, actually, I forgot to mention that Eternia has voice acting even in a PS1 game, which was very rare at the time. It's not fully voiced, that game, and the voice acting isn't the greatest, but it has voice acting. Now, this game, though, they went full out with the voice acting. It's amazing. And it really, each character in this game, you really get to know well. And that's due to the skits, which were new in this game, at least for North America, for us in North America. Now, the skits I loved when I was a kid. Well, I wasn't really a kid when I played this, but when I was younger, because it really adds a lot of character development, and it's one of my favorite things about Tales games. I especially like how they're voiced nowadays. In Symphonia, they weren't, unfortunately. But they're really interesting. A lot of them are very funny. Tales of Symphonia definitely has a lot of humor to it too, which I was surprised by. It was funny at various times. The spa portions of Tales games, which unfortunately they're starting to get rid of the spa portions. That really bothers me. But those portions of the Tales games are always hilarious and just really fun to see. But like I said before, the combat was great. I loved the world map. This just massive world map, like before, with multiple things to do. I remember playing the game at the time, after I'd beaten it, I looked up a guide to see what kind of stuff I missed, and I was blown away by the stuff I'd missed, especially towards the end of the game. Like, Tales of Symphonia is huge. The first playthrough took me, I think, 62 hours when I first played it, so it's a massive beast of a game. And I took my time with it. I took in everything, and it really kind of rekindled my interest in JRPGs. I played a whole shit ton of them after that. In fact, I think after Symphonia is when I wanted to get a PS2, and I did have a PS2 for a short period. But it really it's stuck with me ever since, and it's what got me into the series. After Tales of Symphonia, I took notice of this series, and I wanted to play like every game that would come out afterwards. And it still stands as one of my favorite Tales games. And I'm very excited for this PS3 release coming up soon. After Tales of Symphonia came Tales of Rebirth. Now, unfortunately, we didn't get this one, which was odd, considering how well Symphonia did. Now, this actually went back to 2D. Tales of Symphonia was in full 3D, which another big addition, another big improvement from Eternia to Symphonia. Or actually, I should say Tales of Destiny 2 do it. Symphonia. Again, I'm kind of only counting like the North American released ones. Now, Rebirth does have a translation being worked on, and I really hope that gets finished soon, because this one apparently is one of the best Tales games, and we missed out on it. But yeah, not too much to really say on it, other than it looks great, and I hope to play it. Now, with that, I'm looking here and I'm noticing this video has already gone on quite a bit, this first part. I don't know, this video, I think the Tales series review is going to go on quite a bit longer than the Zelda series review, I think. But I'll stop here for part 1. We've still got a lot to cover in part 2. I think this is looking like a 4-part video. But that will do it for now. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.